What's up, podcast peeps? Thanks for coming back. Thanks for joining us for another week of My Fantasy Podcast from MyFantasySportsTalk.com. Today, big show. We're getting ever so close. A lot of you may even be weeding out this information now because you've already done your draft, your NFL fantasy football draft. And if that's the case, sorry you did it so early. But we're going to be heavy NFL fantasy football talk today to get you ready for our draft, get you ready for your draft and our draft, which is going to be live on the podcast exactly 2 weeks from tonight, August 23rd at 7:30 Eastern time. So check it out and see what we do. We're also going to touch on fantasy baseball, of course, because Jackson Borland will throw a fit, Dan, if we don't talk baseball. Yeah, he gets upset if we miss a week, and if we don't talk baseball, I don't know what'll happen. Dude's from New York; he's a Yankees fan, so we'll do that. I don't want to make him mad.
I've done that enough. So yes, to appease Jackson, baseball talk, and to me. I mean, I like talking baseball, and our newfound future fantasy runner-up in baseball is getting the hang of it as well. I'm talking about you, Brandon.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I'm making a run for that championship. Hey, I'm hitting a stride here. I am hitting a stride. Nelson Cruz, man, Giancarlo Stanton, they've been hot lately, and I like it. I like where I'm going. While is your kind of sliding a little bit? You got like 25 points right now. Not doing so hot.
Dallas Keuchel minus 20 points last night. That one hurt, not only to watch as a fan, but then to look at that scoreboard. That was rough.
So, yeah, we'll hit on fantasy baseball off the top of the show. Then we'll bring Orlando in here and talk a whole lot of fantasy football, go through articles that we have written and posted on the site, so you can check those out, fantasy prep for you, and answer some questions submitted by you and what you guys want to talk about. Nick and Judy Pertins are back with a great idea, a great question submitted, so we're going to do a little rapid fire question and go through a whole lot of guys suggested to us by Nick Pertins. So appreciate the questions, appreciate the ideas. I am Brandon Reed. That is my co-host Dan Shaw. So let's get into it. My Fantasy Podcast from MyFantasySportsTalk.com. A whole lot of fantasy talk about, but let's kick it off with some fantasy baseball. Before the fantasy news, though, I know something you posted on the site earlier this week, Dan. The MLB playoff schedule was released, so you can kind of see what days you might need to take off already. That's the first thing I looked at, Dan, is I know Dan is looking at ALDS Game A, ALDS Game B, what days you might need to take off because your Astros are going to be a part of it.
They definitely are, and I'm actually going to be in Tampa for that first bulk of the playoffs. So Tampa Bay is fighting for a wild card right now. I'm hoping and praying that they can get it, win that wild card game, and play the Astros in the ALDS, because then I would be in Tampa watching the game live. So that's what I'm hoping for. But again, the thing that was most that stuck out to me the most when putting that article together is there's another potential Game 7 of the World Series to fall in November. So weather might play a factor like it has the last few years. November 1st would be Game 7, so that's something that stuck out to me. And then I'm just hoping my Astros are there playing.
So the wild card games would be October 3rd and 4th. That's a Tuesday and a Wednesday before we get right back into the for real stuff, October 5th and 6th, which is a Thursday and a Friday. So it's going to be an exciting time. We're almost there, Dan. We were looking at our and talking about our MyFantasySportsTalk.com fantasy league. And after this week, we have got 2 weeks left. That is it.
Yeah, it's winding down, and that's what makes fantasy baseball very fun for me. Something that I'm sure you'll probably get into is, the playoffs of fantasy baseball are during that stretch run of the baseball season. So teams are fighting for it, but then a lot of it also has to do with rosters get enlarged, and a lot of minor leaguers come up and might take some of the veterans that you have on your team's playing time. So it's something you're going to have to adjust to. As the season winds down. So it's something that I love, the intricacies of the sport and fantasy baseball. So it's going to be an exciting time, and my first place lead is probably only going to grow.
Well, you ain't got much time for that. So Dan, the one and only Jose Ma Altuve, is 14-3, killing the league. He only got 29 points right now, though. I'm sure he'll come back, but man, a lot of them Astros struggling for you, which is bringing your scores down, but still 14-3. We've got 2 guys in second place, myself at 11-6, and Chad Dingus, which is the Savannah Sand Gnats, is 11-6 as well. Then we got Landon Cloud at 10-7. And those are your top dogs. Those are your top dogs. But as we found out in football, when yours truly won the championship, all you got to do is make the playoffs. Then it's on. But I'm making a run, Dan. You got to admit my team is coming on strong right now. I'm in a battle though. I'm in a battle. Seb Ass Roy. You know who Seb Ass Roy is?
No.
It's 120 to 118, but Seb Ass Roy is about to take a Seb Ass kicking this week. I'll eventually pull away. And so you're just the opposite of what you got going on with Keuchel. And Chris Sale had 39 for me last night or the night before last.
Yeah, I mean, our league caters to strikeouts. So, Sale is probably one of the best pitchers right now to even own. So props to you for getting him. Do you know what round you got him in? I think he fell a little bit.
I doubt. I don't think I took a pitcher first overall. No. I'm pretty sure I took Giancarlo Stanton first overall. But I can tell you real quickly. It had to have been fairly early though, because
I think so. But yeah, I mean, I think you got him for how he's pitching right now. I think you got him at a great value, and
17th overall.
Okay, yeah, I mean that's pretty solid.
So explain.
Best pitcher, the best pitcher in the American League. You got 17th overall, so that speaks to your drafting skills. Look, I can give you compliments.
I kind of know what I did in the early rounds. I mean, I know some baseball players, but once you got pretty deep, like rounds, 10, 11 and on, then it got a little watered down for me. But so explain this to me, the newbie playing fantasy baseball. Our pitchers, of course, pitchers put up the huge numbers. Also, they could put up the huge negative numbers too. But so pitchers put up the huge numbers. But are they typically the guys? If I got Sale 17th overall, are pitchers kind of like the running backs in NFL, where people are trying to get the best ones of those first? Or are they more like the quarterbacks? Well, you can wait. You need to get the other skill position players first.
I mean, a lot of it depends on your strategy. I'm one who goes after pitchers early,
first pick, first round.
I mean, consistently in the first 5 rounds, I'd probably grab at least 3 pitchers. And the reason for that, in a points league like we play, like you said, I mean, if you get them on a 2-start week, they can give you 60 points, 30 points each start for those high-end guys. When you get to those mid-level or, mediocre pitchers, if you wait on them, they're not going to score as many points, on a very good day, and they're going to have a lot more negative point starts throughout the season, which ultimately will hurt. And if that's who you have at the top of your pitching staff on your fantasy baseball team, you're probably not going very far.
Yeah, it's and we got some questions here that we're going to get to in just a second. So, but that's kind of the way the MyFantasySportsTalk.com fantasy league is breaking down right now. Again, after this week, we've got 2 more weeks of regular season play and then the playoffs. So, Dan, I haven't looked ahead. How many teams are making the playoffs? 4? Are we talking about top 4 here?
I think we have a 12-man league, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's probably a top 4. That's what I would assume. That we have set up. I set it up so long ago, this lovely baseball season, I don't even remember, and I've been in first place the whole time, so who cares, really?
What's that got to do with anything? You know what? I've pretty much been in second the whole time. Yeah. Worse, maybe tied for second or a slight game behind, but I've been pretty much second. So that's amazing, Dan. Me and you are just we're fantasy wizards. We're fantasy. It doesn't matter what sport. I mean, we could jump into a new sport that we're not even familiar with. And just go right at it. We're just right at it.
We have completely different views on players too, which is also, I think, impressive. We get into it. We've gotten heated. I don't know what's going on with us lately. It's a little attitude maybe I've gotten, just thinking I'm the grand poobah of fantasy, and then B. Reed comes in and I'm a champion. So we've gone at it. The listeners don't even know how bad it's been, but we have different opinions on players, yet we're still always 1-2. So I like that. I think that's impressive.
Dan, I always disagree and have difference of opinions with all my friends, even my closest friends. That's how you know I like you, because whether it's about sports or politics or just
it's just me getting over the fact that I have a friend and a co-host who's always wrong. So because I mean, what I say is truth, and my fantasy sports talk listeners know that. So send some mail, send some mailbag questions. This is for the listeners out there. Next week, I want to get some that agree with my opinion of my prowess over Brandon Reed, and we're going to get into that. You guys will know more about what we're talking about when we get into the fantasy football preview, because we're going to probably differ on a lot of players, and we're both very strong-hearted in what we believe. So you guys will find that out, and let us know what you think. I want to know whose side you're on, whether it's mine or Brandon's. That'll be some interesting feedback that we get for next week's show.
And when it comes to fantasy football, I'll remind you guys when the time comes who is the champ and who has the title. So send all correspondence to Dan Shaw. I ain't got time for that. I'm studying the repeat. But hey, let's answer some fantasy mailbag questions from the fantasy baseball world and get into it. First one comes from Walt McMichael. Is Carlos Gonzalez droppable? Dude is straight up trash. Period. That's it. So, I mean, Walt, I think you just answered your own question, buddy. I'll allow you to vent, but I'm not going to say garbage, because he's putting up something every single game. And it's rare that he puts up negative numbers, and they're not big negative numbers, but he's doing something every single game. Played every day in the last 2 weeks, except one. I think that was the team's off day. And he's only had 2 negative numbers in that 2-week period. So if your team is stacked, he may be garbage, and he's not putting up big numbers statistically if you look at, overall MLB statistics. But like I said, he's putting up something, and his fantasy production is fairly steady. So I would, in our league anyway, I would be afraid to give that up. Some kind of production every single day, because it's going to be hard at this time of the year to find that on the waiver wire, but it all depends on your league. So there's a reason you're saying that he's trash. I'm not seeing trash out of him though, Dan, are you?
Well, as an owner of Carlos Gonzalez last year, in the type of production that he put up, high 30 home runs, close to 100 RBI. You look at his numbers now: 226 batting average, 7 home runs, 32 RBIs. I mean, the numbers don't speak to what he's capable of. Now, depending on your league, our league is points based, so that's what Brandon's talking about with like the negative numbers. But there are some category leagues that highly favor like batting average and on base percentage. So if your league is something like that, and it's not deep, not as deep, then yeah, I would say he's probably waiver wire material. But if you're in a deep league, probably the options out there aren't going to be that high. And there's always that chance that, August and September, he can get hot in Coors Field and hit some balls out of the park. So if you could, I would hang on to him. But I mean, he's definitely been a disappointment compared to what he had last year, because I loved having him on my team last season.
And again, yeah, it depends on the type of league that you're in, because I would say in our league, I'm not sure you're going to find someone in the waiver wire right now that is steadily putting up those numbers every single day. But if you're in a category league, then yeah, he's probably not putting up the best numbers. I checked it, but I forgot, like maybe 7 home runs, 30 RBIs.
32 RBI.
Yeah, yep. Not great, not statistically great, but for the points league like we're in, it's not that bad. There's not much out there left on the waiver wire at this point, especially if you're in a fairly deep league, 8 to 12 guys at least. So, but good luck, Walt. I think you have your reasons for saying that he's absolute trash. I suspect you may be in a category league like Dan was talking about. Then yeah, may be the case. So, but depending on which kind of league you're in, take a look at that if you're a Carlos Gonzalez owner before you make that decision. All right, let's move on. Before we get into our fantasy football talk and bring Orlando in here, one more question. This one comes from Jason Welch. Does Ian Kennedy have any fantasy value left? I held on to him after he started 0-7 or something like that, and he started to turn it around, but now his suckiness is back. So Here we go. As a Ian Kennedy owner myself, I think he has fantasy value left. He's hit a bad stretch, but had a decent July. He's definitely had a bad stretch in the last 4 starts. Put up negative numbers in 3 of those 4 starts. But but you have to temper your expectations. It depends on what you're expecting of him. He's realistically probably a 6th guy in my rotation. So he's in there. I got him. I didn't want to drop him because he has put up 20 plus several times, but I haven't been able to find anyone else on the waiver wire that I trust more than him at this point. So several 20 plus, if you can find a guy with more 20 plus point games in the last 6 weeks on your waiver wire, then I say go for it. But I doubt that person is out there if you're playing a points league like we're in. Dan?
Yeah, I'm impressive you held on to him after that 0-7 stretch. And in a different league, I actually owned him and I dropped him. I was fed up with the constant losses, and in our points league, it's 7 points, negative 7 points for a loss. So that definitely hurt. So I dropped him. I would say you might want to hang on to him, like Brandon, kind of said. There might not be better options on the waiver wire. If you're in a shallow league, yeah, you should let him go. But if you're in a deeper format, you really got to scan the waiver wire and see what's out there. You're going to get bad starts from Ian Kennedy. He's allowed 11 runs in his last 3 starts. He's got almost a 5 ERA. So, what type of pitcher he is, but he has that capability of a high volume strikeout game, which will give you a lot of points. So scan the waiver wire. If there's a mediocre or a young guy coming up, there's Atlanta called up a guy, last name is Sims, who's been pretty impressive. The Reds have a few young guys in the rotation who have been good and probably on the waiver wire in a lot of leagues. So I would look at some other options, but Ian Kennedy might be the best that there is.
Like I said, my barometer would be look on the waiver wire. If you see anybody putting up 20 point plus games, then sure, give it a try. And he was on my bench quite a bit. I was kind of moving him in and out. Like I said, he's basically like a 6th guy in my starting pitching rotation. So I wasn't counting on him real heavily. The few times I looked throughout the season, I didn't see anybody with more of a pop than he was that I trusted long term. So just kind of held on to him. But appreciate the questions, guys. That's a real quick fantasy baseball whip around for this week because we got a lot of fantasy football to talk. We've been writing a lot of articles on fantasy football. We got our draft coming up 2 weeks from tonight live on the show. So we got to get into it. And we'll bring Orlando Torres in here and talk some fantasy football too. I've pulled up our fantasy tab on the website, Dan. I got it ready to go. A lot of good stuff here. So we'll get into fantasy football with Orlando next. You're listening to and watching My Fantasy Podcast from myfantasysportstalk.com. Appreciate it, guys. The rest of the show is going to be all fantasy football, all for you. Hope you haven't drafted yet, so we got a lot of good information here. And before, we might want to save Dan's last article for last. Or we might want to get it out of the way with, because it might be a long, heated conversation, and Orlando might have to play referee. But he's here to do that. He's our man from San Antonio. He loves the ladies. I mean, a lot. Like, he only loves the ladies. Orlando Torres, man, what's going on? School finally winded down for you? I mean, can you only work and write and take care of your son now and just have a family life now?
Yeah, well, he's actually with his mom right now in school. I got a break from school for the next 3 weeks, so that's a bit of a relief. So,
3 whole weeks, huh?
3 whole weeks. You gotta love every minute of it, because it's gonna be hell when it starts all over again. Especially with the season coming upon us, so we're going to be busy as hell with the site as well. But I'm enjoying it.
Yep. Yeah, you've been throwing out some great articles there. We'll get into 6 risk versus reward fantasy players to keep in mind heading into your draft. So, but let's kind of start with the most recent stuff, guys. And this is the spot right now, Dan. This is the spot for fantasy prep. I don't know many more sites out there are throwing the variety of stuff at you, stuff that not a lot of people are thinking about. These are very unique stories that are going to eventually pop up in your fantasy drafts that you probably need to know. So if you just read the articles and keep it in the back of your mind, it's going to be a great help come your draft in the panic moment that one of us may have August 23rd.
Yeah. I mean, myself, Orlando, Casey Birch has tossed out some stuff. Colby Gatz, back from getting married, back writing on the site. So we've got a group of guys that are just busting out fantasy coverage every single day, and it's different things, like Orlando brought out those 6 risk versus reward players. Well, he had a previous article with doing the same thing. So he's covering a lot of guys. I'm going a little bit in depth into certain players, whether it be soon to be bust Eddie Lacy or Dak Prescott, Jameis Winston, because that was an interesting one that I wrote yesterday. Dak Prescott in every site that I'm looking at is ranked above Jameis Winston in fantasy football, and that's crazy to me. So I dug a little deeper looking at the stats and put together some reasons why it's clear that Winston should not be drafted after Dak. And if that's the case, I mean, you're just getting fantastic value for my number 1 fantasy quarterback, Jameis Winston.
And that reminds me real quick before I lose my train of thought and forget to mention it, this is not really fantasy related, but a little bit fantasy related. You can tie it into fantasy, but Hard Knocks debuted last night, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and your own Jameis Winston there, Dan. So I'll be recapping every single week the episodes. I think it usually runs 5 or 6 weeks of Hard Knocks, and we're also going to do kind of a tie-in with Thomas Take, our own Ryan Thomas of the Thomas Take Sports podcast. I'm going to be writing the articles, reviewing it immediately after the episode airs and throwing that out there. And Thomas Take is going to subsequently follow up with a Thomas Take podcast talking about each individual episodes as well. So nice tie in there. I'll write about it. Then you can hear Thomas Take, Ryan Thomas talk about it. So, but I think HBO made a great selection this year, Dan. I don't know that you've had a chance to actually watch that first episode, but you don't really get, I don't know what people are expecting as far as having the personalities of Deshaun Jackson and Jameis Winston on TV. That may be a little bit of a letdown for you if you go to the site and read my article, but as far as realizing the talent they have on that team this year in Tampa Bay, they are going to be good. No way they miss the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I have them in the conference championship game. That's how much I believe in the Buccaneers this year. So that was actually in my 50 things of my bold predictions that I make every year. So definitely check out that article on the site. But I love the Bucs this year. The weapons that they have around Jameis, they have a stockpile of running backs from Doug Martin, Charles Sims, Jacquizz Rodgers. They drafted McNichols, out of Boise State, who I'm a big fan of. So I mean, OJ Howard, Cameron Brate. I mean, they just have weapons all over, and it's an improving defense. So anytime Gerald McCoy is your anchor, I think you're going to be okay on the defensive front. I just like Tampa Bay a lot this year, and I think that offense is going to be prolific.
Orlando, what do you think about Tampa Bay this year? And did you have a chance to watch Hard Knocks, or do you usually keep up with the Hard Knocks series on HBO?
Yeah, I try to keep up with Hard Knocks. I haven't been able to keep up with it lately, but I'm really high on the Bucs this year too. Not trying to ruin it, but I totally agree with Dan with Jameis being up there was one of the tier quarterbacks, the elite quarterbacks this season, and I'm really high on his weapons too. Even if their running game is a mess, I like their passing weapons. I like some of the players they have coming up, and I'm really high on the Bucs too. And it's hard to not see them win or just compete and push the other teams in the NFC South.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't know who their main competition will be. Who is fighting for second in that division?
I mean, the South to me is loaded. You have Atlanta, obviously went to the Super Bowl last year. Carolina, I think, is going to be improved, and I hate Carolina.
I was about to say that. That's why I didn't think you had them rated very high, because I personally think New Orleans this is the year they're finally going to be at the bottom. I don't know that Carolina's going to bounce back. In Atlanta, yeah, they should be the top, but
They didn't lose anybody. I mean, they're coming back.
Hightower, I guess.
And I think that's one of the toughest divisions. And I actually like New Orleans a lot this year. I think they're improved on defense. I hate Adrian Peterson, but I love Alvin Kamara paired with Mark Ingram. I think Michael Thomas is my number one fantasy wide receiver. There's no stopping Drew Brees. The last few years, I've said he's gonna hit that peak. He's gonna hit that peak, and I've ranked him very low. Not this year. I'm still believing.
How do you rank that in NFC South then, Dan? Rank them 1 through 4.
Tampa Bay, Atlanta, Carolina, New Orleans. I think they're all going to be 8-8 or the bottom. I'm like New Orleans and Carolina. I actually have Carolina at 9-7. So. New Orleans will be that 7-9, 8-8, but that's still pretty solid, and I think an improvement from what they were a year ago.
Well, and someone's got to fall apart here, and I hate to say it, but usually in the years past, other than last year, it's been the Atlanta Falcons, right? How many times have they started out hot and just fell apart? So
Super Bowl hangover too. You never know what that that deflation that they did. Did you get that pun? Deflation in the Super Bowl when they allowed the Patriots to come back, so they might not be right.
We'll see. So one of the first articles I want to get to on the site and talk about is one that Colby Gatz, Dan mentioned earlier, came back strong. I think he's been hiding since the Celtics ended their season because he made some bold predictions there. But anyway, he's back out of hiding. He did get married, but he's back out of hiding. Anyway, which Patriots running back should you draft? And this kind of ties in a little bit to a question from Nick Pertins, which we'll get into in depth with his question because that's a whole topic of its own. We're going to break down rapid fire a whole lot of players there that Nick Pertins suggested. So, but he mentioned the Patriots running back mess. So this article kind of tries to shed light on that, and it's an obvious sore topic for a lot of people, right? Who do you draft on the Patriots, or do you sort it out, or do you stay away from them all? Orlando, what do you think? It's always been that case. For me, it's always been that way going back 4 or 5 years. I don't want no part of any Patriots running back because you never know from game to game who Belichick is going to play.
Yeah, no, it's it's a mess. It's a situation you want to be in, and they have a lot of running backs. You got to think that Super Bowl MVP James White's got to be in a mix. They brought in Mike Gillislee. Now there's talks that Rex Burkhead is going to be their goal line back. So it's a mess. If I am taking a Patriots quarterback, I am probably going to try to take Gillislee. And James White will have to be one of my second pickups that I will get. I'm still not sure with the Rex Burkhead. I do know they like him a lot. But that's what you expect from the Patriots. It's nothing new, and it's going to continue being like that. I hope the guy is Mike Gillislee. But if you hit on the right week, you're going to get some good points out of one of those running backs. But it's going to be hard and just a headache. Each week in and week out deciding which Patriots running back you're going to start in your lineup that week.
So Dan kind of broke down the ADPs for us, and we'll talk about all these guys later, but these specific Patriots guys, while we're talking about this article, is that James White is being drafted average about 15 spots higher than Mike Gillislee. So that's about right if you say James White is going to be the RB1 and Gillislee is the RB2 for the Patriots. And the other guys, Burkhead, Dion Lewis, Rex Burkhead, who Orlando mentioned, way down there. So it's about right, Dan, right? James White should be number one. Then you think about Gillislee?
Yeah, well, so with the ADPs, the right side, just so you're aware, so James White is being drafted 135th overall, Gillislee 62nd overall in fantasy drafts. Gillislee's ranked 23rd, where James White is ranked 48th. Gillislee.
Okay, so 48th. So what are you saying? James White is 48th.
He's the 48th ranked running back.
Running back specifically. So you're telling me
running back specifically and 135th overall. So he's being drafted. He's the 48th running back that's being drafted in drafts.
And Gillislee
at that 135th overall.
And mark. Gillislee is 23rd. So the Super Bowl MVP.
23rd ranked. Yep. Most people are drafting Gillislee. They hear some goal line back rumors. That's how he's been lining up in the beginning of training camp. Rex Burkhead is coming in now, which I think just shows that it's a mess, like we just stated.
That's exactly what I was about to say.
I would just stay away. I mean, you don't know right away. I mean, if they're, drafting later in your draft or still available, after round 10, 11 for Gillislee, which I don't think will happen looking at the numbers. He's being drafted around the 6th round. So I wouldn't take him that early. It's just too much of a question mark. I think you'd rather want to play those guys in a daily fantasy type scenario if you're pretty confident, injuries, things like that. But in a season-long league, I would be scared.
I mean, me personally, that's the approach I always have with the Patriots running backs. Like I said, going back 4 or 5 years, I'm just scared of them all because not only production-wise and how it's all going to shake out and injuries and all that, it's just Belichick is unpredictable with his running back situation. It always has been. So let's move on to the next one I want to talk about. You guys need to check out is Orlando's. So we'll turn it over to Orlando. 6 risk versus reward fantasy players to keep in mind heading into your draft. Orlando, what sparked you to write this piece and the guys you talk about specifically, and explain yourself.
Yeah, I think the headline speaks for itself. Just some guys just to take in consideration when I'm drafting, or if they cross your mind, if you should take them at a certain spot. I mean, it's still early compared to what the final rosters are going to be. But you think of a guy like Ty Montgomery. If you're taking him, because he's going pretty early too. A lot of times I see him go as a high-end RB2, or sometimes I see some guys go wide receiver heavy and take him as an RB1. Now, that's pretty scary if you're heavily depending on Ty Montgomery as a RB1, just because you don't know if he's going to fit that right specifically. Even last year as a running back for the Packers, he had a couple of games where he went off specifically against the Bears, but nothing to make you feel too comfortable about taking him this year pretty high, like the way I've been seeing him go in mocks.
We're going to talk about him a little bit more later too. So, but skipping down to the bottom of the list, I want to get your opinion on something, because this is the guy I really haven't heard much said about in this, pre-fantasy draft talk conversations. A guy who switched teams last year is Danny Woodhead. So what's your take on Danny Woodhead?
Well, just with the Ravens, I mean, Kenneth Dixon is gone due to injury, and Terrence West is the number one. But I don't know how comfortable you feel about Terrence West as the number one, because Kenneth Dixon still got sprinkled in last year with Terrence Wentz having that starting role, and even at 32, you figure that Danny Woodhead's going to get sprinkled in a lot. You already know what he could do. I know he's coming off an ACL injury, but he's just too much value. He's too valuable to just leave. Not out there with the team. So I think Danny Woodhead still provides a lot of value, and where you're drafting him too, where you're going to get him in a draft is relatively cheap. He's not going as high as he was last year in the whole mixable Melvin Gordon when he was with the Chargers. So I think Danny Woodhead, especially in PPR, especially like in a big league like the way we're doing, Danny Woodhead could be a pretty valuable asset to your team.
Yeah, he's one of those guys. He's always dangerous because of his versatility, and on a new team, new role. When guys switch teams like that, it's just hard to really say. So that's exactly what Orlando's talking about when you're talking about risk versus reward, because you just don't know yet. No one knows. And that's why I was giving Dan a little bit of crap about his ADP, which it's a useful tool to me to know when I might have to take a guy based on what other people are going to do if I really want a guy. But as far as eventual output, nobody knows. Nobody really knows. That's why we play every single year. So let's talk about Dan's article. Came out yesterday. He published fantasy football debate here. Dak Prescott versus Jameis Winston. This one's easy to me. Are people actually debating this, Dan?
I mean, that's according to how drafts are going. Yeah, I mean, I guess they're dealing with mental debates. I mean, I know the Cowboys are a popular team and they have a lot of fans, and I for one like to at least have 1 to 2 Cowboys on my team. So maybe there's a lot of Cowboys fans overdrafting Dak, which is quite possible. Maybe they think they can improve off of his fantastic rookie season, which I think is going to be tough to do, throwing only 4 picks. I see that number rising this season. So they did, but it's not justified in my mind. I just think Jameis Winston is clearly going to have the better fantasy season. compared to Dak. And that, I mean, they're just going to pass the ball more than the Cowboys are. And, you know, people look at Dak's rushing ability. He had 6 rushing touchdowns last season. Well, so did Jameis Winston his rookie season. And in his sophomore campaign, he only had 1. So I don't think the Cowboys want to utilize Dak in a running role. So I don't see a similar season. I expect a decrease of a season for Dak this year.
I agree with you. I completely agree with you. He played a very conservative, game manageable type game last year as a rookie behind the best offensive line in football, and had a rookie running back to hand the ball off to a lot. So it was easy, right? I mean, if he would have played for just about any other team, it wouldn't have been near that easy. So it's just a little bit easier for him. And here's the thing. This is why I love the Hard Knocks series year after year, regardless of the team. It's just because you get a little bit more in-depth look at the personalities of guys. And that's why I was down on Jared Goff last year. Because if you watch the Hard Knocks series, the dude just didn't look like he had it up here. He just kind of looked like, oh, okay, I'll do this. Okay, I'll do that. Okay. You know, sorry, no disrespect, Jared, but I don't think you're gonna make it. I still don't think that, and I don't think it was upstairs for you. But some people can't adjust to the complexity of the game. It's totally understandable. It is. It's a full-time job. It's a real job. But this year, Jameis actually showed maturity for me. Just one episode. I know, not gonna get crazy on you guys, but Jameis showed maturity. And just an understanding of what he needs to do, and it seems to be listening to the coaches and honestly wants their valuable input. Teach me, make me better. I want this thing to go all the way. And that's what I saw at a Hard Knocks episode 1. So I was impressed. I was really impressed. The show started out with kind of an in-depth look, back in Bessemer, Alabama, of his family, where he grew up. Growing up in Bessemer, Alabama, and like that. So very interesting. Check it out if you have it. So that's interesting. And then also Colby's back with a better chance of a breakout year now. I know this has been a debate topic so far this offseason, really since the draft, is who is going to have a breakout fantasy year. McCaffrey or Fournette? That's by Colby Gatz. I'll tell you one thing you guys may not have known. Do you know Leonard Fournette has the most guaranteed money of any running back in the NFL as of right now? Is that not crazy? That's why Le'Veon Bell is holding out right now, guys, because Leonard Fournette hadn't played a snap in the NFL and has more guaranteed money than any running back in the NFL, $27 million.
Did Devontae Freeman break that with his new deal? He may have.
But not as of this morning. If it came through today, then possibly. Yeah,
he did sign an extension today, and that made him, what I read, the highest paid running back. It might not have been guaranteed money, but yeah, I mean, that's the Jaguars got their guy. I mean, they're going to use him as a workhorse, so I don't think he's going to see any shortage of 20 carries a game. He's going to be giving that ball a lot. They're not going to want turnover Bortles to consistently drop back and pass, because even in training camp, he's been throwing to the wrong side. The wrong team, basically. He's been picked off consistently throughout camp, and that definitely probably worries the coaching staff, which puts more touches in Fournette's pocket.
Orlando, would you not agree that both of these guys are really dramatically, fantasy production aside for a second, both of these guys are almost exactly what their teams needed? They're both going to help their teams drastically, I think, immediately.
Yeah, I know they are, and I think if you're Cam Newton, you can't be more than grateful for the guys taking a guy like Christian McCaffrey. That benefits him a lot and his health, and him from taking a bunch of hits, and Blake Bortles as well too for not throwing as much. For anything for Jacksonville, one of their big things that hasn't gotten them very far in the season has been the lack of the run game, and Leonard Fournette definitely helps put a stamp on that to help. Put away with that. So hopefully we go ahead and see that. And he has a lot of success this season with the Jacksonville Jaguars.
So that's just a little bit of what's going on the website right now, myfantasysportstalk.com. Check it out. So many fantasy articles right there, and so much in-depth information that you're all going to come across when it comes time to draft your fantasy team this year. So it's definitely helpful information. Myself as a fantasy player, every single year, I want to consume as much information as I can to help my picks and sort out things in my head. So check out the website. A lot going on. We had a whole fantasy tab. It's called Fantasy. You just got to click it, and there's all kinds of information there. myfantasysportstalk.com. So what we're going to do next, me and Dan are going to talk about Eddie Lacy, because I want this to happen. Ooh, Orlando, put your referee shirt on. Put your referee shirt on. Based on conversations we had yesterday, Dan decided to write an article, and it goes something like this: why you should stay away from Eddie Lacy in fantasy football this season. So we're going to talk about that next and hash that out, me and Dan, and then we're going to get into a complete breakdown suggested by Nick Pertins, one of our favorite fans here on the show, and break down some rapid fire, a whole lot of guys here on where they're positioned to be drafted right now and what we think about them next. So watch out. This debate's about to be hot. You're listening to and watching My Fantasy Podcast from myfantasysportstalk.com. Thanks for coming back. Thanks for clicking. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching wherever you do it. YouTube, iTunes, SoundCloud, WBLZsports.com, myfantasysportstalk.com, wherever you may check us out. Appreciate it. And the reason you do is because me and Dan are so entertaining here with our debates and our fire. Orlando kind of plays mediator. Orlando doesn't get heated one way or another, but me and Dan often do. And one topic that is really setting us on opposite sides of the table right now, as we kind of teased earlier, is this Eddie Lacy debate. I don't know what Dan's thinking here. I mean, I don't know, but keep preaching it, man. Keep preaching it. Keep preaching Eddie Lacy's going to suck this year, because I'll grab him in the 7th round and be very happy with it. See, speechless. I rendered him speechless.
You know what? See, you made this so I wouldn't be able to hear what you said. So that's okay. But
I do got a mute button.
Eddie Lacy
I got a mute button. Sorry, Dan. You were breaking up a little bit there, so sorry. Yeah, but go ahead.
Yeah, again, you're just continuing to mess up the connection. But Eddie Lacy, I mean, it's just I don't know where you're getting your facts from, where all of a sudden he's fantasy running back when he has been. He's not all of a sudden just going to and he does RB1, RB2. He had a good rookie season. He had a pain, and he's done better. And he's not even going to be number one lead back. He's going to be splitting time basically the entire time with Thomas Rawls and CJ Prosise. So check out what Eddie Lacy is all of a sudden, because he's starting to work out, that he's going to be a great back. I don't see it, and I'm not buying it.
It's not that he's all of a sudden going to be a great running back because he's working out. It's because he's no longer under Aaron Rodgers. No running back is ever going to succeed at a high level under Aaron Rodgers, because Aaron Rodgers has to throw the ball 35 times to 40 times a game. He has to. It's only smart. It's only smart with a guy like Aaron Rodgers. No knock on Aaron Rodgers at all, but he's going to have to. And so no running back is going to be a stud under an Aaron Rodgers type scheme. Tom Brady the same. That's why I asked you guys before, how many 1,200-yard rushers has the Patriots ever had under Tom Brady? It's rare. It's rare. And that's my whole thing. And I'm not saying take the guy in the first, second, or third round. I'm saying he's going to be a very good, solid RB2 on your fantasy team, because I think you guys are wrong about CJ Prosise. And I'm going to Orlando next because he is high on CJ Prosise. I say CJ Prosise won't find the field, guys, unless Rawls or Eddie Lacy goes down and misses significant time. I'm sorry. It's not going to happen. With the versatility of Russell Wilson and the other weapons they have, on offense, it's Prosise isn't going to find the field. So Orlando, take up for your guy. Why do you think it's Prosise going to have such a great year this year?
Well, I think he was breaking out last year before he even went down with his injury.
No one was left, though. He was the guy. I mean, no one was left to even run the ball.
But, I mean, he's a great pass-catchy back, and, I have been taking Prosise a lot, but I would definitely pass on Eddie Lacy and wait on a guy like Prosise later on. Even Thomas Rawls. You're getting Thomas Rawls basically cheap. Eddie Lacy, I'm not such in a hurry. I guess 7th to 8th round is pretty good value for Eddie Lacy, but that's another mess you don't feel too comfortable being stuck with either. But CJ Prosise is a guy I am high on. I think he's a good player. Good players eventually find their way on the field, and I think it's going to be hard to just ignore CJ Prosise and what he could do. He may not be every down third down type of back, but he's a great pass catcher, similar to what Bilal Powell provides to his team, or Theo Riddick.
Well, you guys saw the pictures that I posted on our chat board. Eddie Lacy he's cut weight. He looks good to me. He looks good as far as Eddie Lacy shape, and I just think it's a new situation. He is the number 1 running back on the Seahawks, guys. Rawls ain't gonna be taking % of the snaps. I can promise you that, unless Lacy gets hurt.
Pete Carroll's already come out and said that Thomas Rawls and Eddie Lacy are going to be splitting first down and second down reps. Third down is already going to Prosise. He is their third down back. I mean, it's what has been said. So to our listeners, just don't be wary, because he's not going to be that number 1 back. And when Eddie Lacy was a number 1 back in Green Bay, he averaged 20 carries a game his first and second season. And that's when he put up decent numbers. But, I mean, this thought that Aaron Rodgers doesn't run the ball. I mean, he got 20 carries a game. He was actually a decent receiving option.
But he never got the big carries. Those always went to James Starks or John Kuhn. You know, he was carrying what he could.
You get 20 touches a game, I would expect you to do something with it on my fantasy team.
No,
I don't care where those touches are. You can give the ball
those carries
Prosise at the 50, and he can take off for a touchdown, and you're getting your long run bonus. So,
but it's scheme. That's what I'm saying. This change of scenery is going to be completely different, because those 20 carries you're talking about in Green Bay was only to set up an Aaron Rodgers pass. That's all. It wasn't to get big yardage. If he broke one, great. I appreciate it.
Green Bay had a decent offensive line. The Seahawks have the 32nd ranked offensive line by Pro Football Focus. I mean, they're terrible.
I understand that. I understand that completely. But what I'm saying is those runs that Eddie Lacy had, even his rookie year, when he's fresh, a rookie stud, was only to set up an Aaron Rodgers pass. That's not going to be the case. Seattle's a lot more spread out, wide open offense. As far as you don't know what they're going to do. They had a bad year last year. I just think they're going to be healthy. The offensive line, yes, was their problem last year, but
they did nothing to shore it up in the offseason.
Not particularly. No, not particularly. But I still think they're not the really kind of ground and pound type team. But when you don't know what's going to hit you, whether it be a Russell Wilson pass or throw, whether it be a Jimmy Graham or one of the wide receivers breaking out, I think it's a scary offense to play defense against, is what I'm saying. Unless you can control that defensive line. If you can control that defensive line and just rush through there all day long, then I agree with you. That's the only downfall. So I'm not saying that Eddie Lacy is going to have a great year, but I have no reservations about him being my number 2 running back. I really don't think that. I don't think Prosise is going to touch the field, and I don't see a split. Coaches say a lot of things in early training camps, guys. They say a lot of things, but when it boils down to it, I honestly think that Eddie Lacy is going to get 60-65% of the workload.
Yeah. All right, guys. Week 2, we're going to look at how many touches Prosise gets. I guarantee it'll be around 10 touches, rushing and receiving. So we'll look. We're gonna. This is going to be a weekly segment to carry on throughout the season to track our boy Eddie Lacy's progress, because Brandon Reed has developed a man crush, and
it's not that.
He wishes he could do P90X with Eddie Lacy and Tony Horton. Who's the founder?
It's not that. I'm just telling you guys are undervaluing him. And since our man Nick Pertins, which we're going to get into in just a second, either didn't list him or Dan's just hating on Eddie Lacy, he's not listed, or he's not a number 1. I understand.
Because Nick Pertins is smart enough not even to think about drafting him.
Yeah, Nick, come on now. Come on. Seriously, ADP. What is he, Dan? What is he, ADP?
It's actually in my article. I think right now he is being drafted as the 26th running back, I believe it is. I mean, yeah, 29th best running back with an ADP of 70th overall. So around round 7. But in the last 2 weeks, he's been a top 35 pick.
Because pitchers are getting out of him in training camp. Guys.
Yeah, you draft a guy on how he looks.
But isn't that the biggest thing with Eddie Lacy? Come on now. That's always been the biggest thing with Eddie Lacy. He's looked like Pablo Sandoval sometimes.
He did P90X last offseason and dropped 30 pounds. And then halfway through the year, after his ankle surgery, he gained it all back. So, I mean, he came into shape last offseason and he got hurt. He's injury prone too. I mean, he's only played one 16-game season. So the likelihood of one Seattle running back getting hurt, it's going to be Eddie Lacy.
Yeah, no, I definitely stay away because I heard all the bonus money or all the money he's been getting from hitting his weight gains was just to open up another buffet. So I'm not even sure if I'm touching Eddie Lacy in the 7th round.
Okay, guys, you got a lot of fair points.
A lot of fried chicken with those bonuses.
You got a lot of fair points, guys. If he gets hurt, getting hurt is one thing guys just can't work out, particularly if you're running back and it's a lower body injury where you just can't work out and stay in shape. But I think he has a tendency to maybe to get a little bit lazy during the season. Lazy. And if that all plays out again, true to form, then you guys will be right eventually. But what I'm saying is he's in shape now. That impressed me. He's on a brand new team, and I don't like any running back. You'll never see me drafting any running back that plays under Aaron Rodgers. And Tom Brady is the same. We talked about the Patriots miss. And I'm not saying, like I said, first 3 rounds. What I'm saying is, round 5, 6, 7, I think he will eventually be a good value pick if he ultimately stays healthy, but we can say that about anybody. So that's where I'm going with Eddie Lacy. I would like to hear you guys. Let's hear a good question about Eddie Lacy next week. Guys, we'll continue this debate because I appreciate it because it's a very interesting thing to me. We're not even talking about Marshawn Lynch here. Marshawn Lynch is another one of those guys, but I think Eddie Lacy is a little bit different situation than that. So let's hear some good Eddie Lacy questions next week, and we will talk about them, I promise you. So since I won that debate against these two guys, let's move on. Let's move on. You got me so rattled. Let me find the question here. So this is from my man Nick Perkins. Maybe Judy had something to do with this too, but Judy is definitely involved in this. So what Nick wants to know here. Hey guys, love the fantasy coverage, but help a busy husband out who really doesn't want to teach his wife fantasy draft prep this year. Can you guys do a quick fire roundtable listing of the top fantasy guys and whether you think they'll be great, terrible, expectations, etc., whatever. Just quick. I'm not looking for a long drawn-out answer, 10 seconds or so for each one of the guys that are on Nick's list. Nick put the list together. Dan did the ADP, so great list by Nick and great work by Dan to get the ADP for us and a little bit more study guide material. So Nick's got his list he's interested in, and he wants to hear about it. Thanks so much. You guys the best. Thanks, Nick and Judy. So I put it together here. I don't know. I've kind of printed out a study guide sheet, man. This is great material, guys. Great material right here. I'll just kind of scan that a little bit as you can see what we're talking about here. But study guide material here for sure that Dan helped put together. So what do you guys want to do? How are we going to tackle this thing? Do you guys want to go straight through the quarterbacks first, then running backs, wide receiver, tight ends, kind of follow that order and maybe take turns? We got the ADP list here and just maybe a quick assessment of each one of these guys and take turns. So we're not all three talking about the same guy. So does that make sense, guys?
Yeah, sure. Yep, I'm good with that.
Okay, so I'll start out with Tom Brady, second quarterback overall drafted. 22nd quarterback drafted, I guess. Is that what you're saying, Dan? Let me clarify that too with your ADP, right? Tom Brady's currently about the second quarterback on average drafted and 25th overall on average drafted.
Mm-hmm. You got it.
So you're looking at second, possibly third round, depending on how big your league is for Tom Brady. Now, here's where I know Dan is going to disagree with me. I'm saying watch Tom Brady's age. Father Time is going to catch up to him. He's been relatively healthy for that, except for that one season. I don't wish ill upon him, but I just don't think that Tom Brady's going to last the whole season. In our league, although he missed 4 games last year, he's finished as like the 14th quarterback in our league. It wasn't real high, guys. Tom Brady's more name recognition than anything right now. So, second quarterback drafted overall. I imagine Aaron Rodgers is number 1, 25th overall pick. So, that kind of lets you know where Tom Brady is. You know what you're getting out of Tom Brady. Dan, Ben Roethlisberger's next.
Yeah, he's the 13th quarterback drafted, 89th overall. So, 8th, ninth round. Big Ben's he's a solid quarterback. I would expect him in that middle teens. That's kind of early teens for him. I don't have him super high, mainly because of his home road splits. He's not the same quarterback on the road that he is at home, and there's some stinker games that he's put up, especially with if Le'Veon Bell or Antonio Brown go down with injury, that drastically cuts into his production as well. So that's decent value, but I like some other names that I think we're going to go over later in a few minutes, like Matthew Stafford or Phillip Rivers, who are actually being drafted way later. I like those guys better.
Orlando, your guys, Russell Wilson, what up?
I'm a little concerned about Russell Wilson. It's not a guy I'm relatively targeting early on in drafts. He's probably towards later in my top 10 or maybe just after the top 10. The rushers are going to fall. The O-line's a mess. That's what concerns me a lot. You look at last year, he started off too. He was rushing. He got hit pretty good, and he got a slow start into the season. And he was drafted relatively high. So Russell Wilson, for me, if you're going to take a guy like Russell Wilson and draft the backup, because he comes with a lot of concerns with that bad O-line.
There you go. Great assessment. My guys, Jameis Winston, 12th quarterback drafted right now, which, again, what Dan talked about, I can't believe that, really. I just don't see that. I'm not going to have that many guys ahead of Jameis Winston this year. No, sir, not with those weapons, not with Deshaun Jackson, and not with Mike Evans, who I don't want to give away too much, guys, because I know you guys are going to be scheming for him, but I have Mike Evans as my number one receiver going into this year. I'll say that. Mike Evans is my number one receiver going into this year. Real high on that dude. 87th overall pick from Jameis Winston. I'd say watch out for Jameis Winston. Very high on him. I think you might want to steal him a little bit earlier than the 87th overall pick. I kind of agree with Dan there. Watch out for Jameis Winston and watch Hard Knocks. Dude is showing maturity, wants to win, wants to be a winner. Big year from Tampa Bay this year. Dan, Marcus Mariota.
Yeah, kind of going in with Jameis Winston, obviously 1-2 in the draft a few years ago. 10th quarterback selected, 70th overall. I like that. I think that's a pretty solid value for Mariota. Getting a little earlier than that, he is still coming off an injury. It's probably not going to be anything, but you never know with that mobile type quarterback. He hasn't been able to fully stay healthy. So that concerns me a little bit. But he's a player, man. He's yet to throw a red zone interception in his career. He's going to get you probably 30 touchdowns. Passing, a few more rushing. I like Mariota a lot. So 10th quarterback, 70th overall. That's pretty solid value.
Matthew Stafford, Orlando.
Oh, yeah. No, I love Matthew Stafford this year, especially for the value you're getting him at. You're getting him around the same rounds that Winston is going, Derek Carr. And Stafford has proven that even though early in his career he's dealing with a lot of injuries, he's been relatively healthy the past couple of seasons. So Stafford, for the rounds you're taking him in the value you're getting him at, you never know if he's going to throw for like 280 and like 3 touchdowns or like 400 or 500 yards because that dude has an arm. So I'm very high on Stafford.
My next guy is Phillip Rivers, 14th quarterback being drafted at ADP right now, 106th overall. I really don't know if that's too high or not. I'm not huge on Phillip Rivers this year, although he's always been pretty good fantasy production. Maybe one of the guys you may want to consider more in daily fantasy on a given week than for your actual long-term league. Just my opinion. But I decided Keenan Allen never stays healthy, unfortunately. I hate that for him. And it's just the Chargers always fall apart. And I see that thing declining in San Diego or Los Angeles now, LAC. So I see that thing just kind of slightly falling apart on Phillip Rivers. And it's just a shame for Phillip Rivers because we debated him up versus Tony Romo's careers, and I personally think Phillip Rivers has had a better career. Longevity, he's a stud, but I think he just, unfortunately for him, he's never had the help. If there's anybody up close right there that I'm going to take a look at, maybe Melvin Gordon, and hopefully he can stay healthy. That's the biggest thing with Phillip Rivers. Although he has stayed healthy, his team is not. That always hurts him, and I just think that's only going to continue a slide for Phillip Rivers. Like him, just staying away from him in probably the first 5 or 6 rounds. I think he's one of the guys that I may want to draft like I did Eli last year, 8th or lower. 8th round or lower, then you may be okay if you're really high on Phillip Rivers. And Dan, how fitting. We're going to come down to the last one we're going to talk about is your boy, Dak Prescott.
Yeah, Dak is the ninth quarterback being drafted 86th overall. So you're looking, 7th to 8th round pick, which to me is way too early for Dak, as I had mentioned earlier in the podcast. I mean, he's just a guy that I believe overperformed a little bit last year. They're not going to be a consistent passing team. They are running the ball quite a bit, and I think his rushing ability is a little bit overstated. I don't think you're going to see him run as much this year, and he's certainly not going to have 6 rushing touchdowns. So be tempered with Dak. He's probably going to get selected if you wait on him any later than this, but I wouldn't touch him within the first 10 rounds of the draft.
First 10, wow.
First 10. I mean,
guys are going to take him.
In a 10-man league, that's 100 overall. I wouldn't take him in the top 100.
Okay. So, Orlando, we're going to move on to running backs now. And your guy is Le'Veon Bell.
Yeah, no, definitely a stud. I mean, there's no question why he's going second overall. No concerns this season. If anything, it's just the injuries, which you can say that about any player. That's just fantasy in general. And, trouble staying on the field. But relatively good. He's coming in relatively healthy. And I know he's having a holdout with some contract disputes going on right now. But he's going to play this year, and he's going to be a stud for your team. No questions there.
Yep, no doubt. So this is interesting because my guy is Ezekiel Elliott. And I happen to have – I'm not going to give away the whole thing, but myself, I have the 3rd pick in our fantasy draft, August 23rd, which will be a live My Fantasy podcast show. And so this guy, Ezekiel Elliott, is coming in as the 3rd running back and the 3rd overall pick. How unique. So let me try to figure that out as who's going 1, 2, and then 3. Real simple here, man. That offensive line, I think Dan is pretty much spot on about Dak's second year here. The fantasy guy to own on the Dallas Cowboys, and just fingers crossed that he stays healthy and takes advantage of that line, is Ezekiel Elliott. So that's the guy I'm most likely taking 3rd, although I'm kind of hoping one of our fans takes Zeke 2nd so I can get Le'Veon Bell. I'm a little bit higher on Le'Veon Bell. But if it comes down to it, I think the smart play is I have to take Ezekiel Elliott 3rd overall. Dan, Leonard Fournette, the rookie.
Yeah, he's the 10th running back selected, 19th overall. So, a 2nd round pick. I like him towards the end of the 2nd round if you're going to take him. I'm still a little bit wary. I think he's going to get a lot of touches, so I don't have many concerns there. But that Jacksonville offensive line is not that good. So I think you're going to see a lot of touches with a low yards per carry. He's gonna get his eventually, but it's gonna be some bulk to do so. So I look at him to have a similar rookie season as Trent Richardson did in Cleveland. He got the ball a ton, almost hit 1,000 yards. I believe he had close to double-digit touchdowns, which definitely helped his value. But he averaged about 3.2 or 3.3 yards a carry. So he's not going to have those 100-yard games, I don't believe, but he's probably going to get a touchdown or around there, close to a game. I expect him to end with around 10 to 12 touchdowns, maybe 900 to 1,000 yards. So that's a pretty accurate value for where he's going. But don't take him in the first round. I've seen that in too many mocks. He's not a first-round pick.
That's a scary proposition, but that also lets you kind of know right there how the trends are going. This is a running back heavy year because he is the 10th running back being selected right now, ADP, and the 19th overall pick. So very heavily weighted towards running backs this year. The next guy for you, Orlando, is another rookie, Joe Mixon.
Yeah, so 17th running back taken, 35th overall. And I'm high on Mixon. He was in my article that you mentioned previously. I know people are worried about the 3-headed monster going on. I'm not. If anything, I think Giovanni Bernard is still going to be around, but Jeremy Hill, I'm not worried about at all. There's talks about him, them, the coaching staff and players want him to be the starter. Listen, it's Joe Mixon. I would not be surprised if by the end of the season people are talking about Joe Mixon being this year's David Johnson. And he's just that good. I think he'll end up finding his way on the field, and he's going to end up eventually taking that starting spot. So the only thing, Nick or Judy, like if you're taking Joe Mixon, just have that cautious to that you might not get that big early play right away. It might be the mid-season, so just take that as a reminder when taking a guy like Mixon. But the reward is definitely there.
Next guy on our list is Jordan Howard. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to cheat a little bit right here. I'm not really high on any of the Bears this year. This is going to be a very interesting year for the Bears. I'm not real big on Jordan Howard. I wasn't that really impressed with him last year. But as these guys, Dan and Orlando, have kind of talked me into that he's going to get a huge workload this year and maybe the only guy. So I think you have to really consider him very high. He's just one of those guys that's going to get the bulk of the carries and it should be valuable. Right now, he's the 8th running back being drafted and 14th overall. So what you may have to make a decision about is whether you're going to take Jordan Howard, an established guy on a team that we don't really know where is going, or would you take one of the rookies like Leonard Fournette, maybe even Christian McCaffrey or someone like that. So you're going to have to make a decision there. But me personally, Jordan Howard's not on my board. I'll probably look for other guys. But if it comes down to it and you're looking at scraps, you have to keep in mind that Jordan Howard is number one. He's going to be number one and probably get a lot of carries, at least early on, and hopefully he stays healthy on a bad Bears team. Dan, you're a guy. You're a former Cowboy. Now my Titan, DeMarco Murray.
Yeah, as a DeMarco Murray owner last year, I was very high on him, and I got him at a great value. I think I got him in the 5th round of our league, and he helped me, garner that first place spot. This year is not the same. I'm not as high on DeMarco Murray as I was last year. He's a year older. Derrick Henry is another year in the system. I screamed bust for Derrick Henry coming into the NFL last year. I like what I saw out of him in his rookie season, so I think he is going to eat into a lot of DeMarco's touches. I think the Titans are going to be a more passing-oriented team. I know you look at their head coach, and he doesn't scream offensive enthusiasm or passing. He's kind of that run-first mentality, but Murray, I'm not as high on for that spot. 12th overall. That's end of the 1st round. I think he's a 2nd-round pick. And he also, New Breed's not going to want to hear this, but he is dealing with a hamstring injury. As a fan of the Cowboys and seeing DeMarco Murray deal with hamstrings consistently with them, it definitely concerns me that it's happening now in camp, and it could be a lingering issue as it has been early in his career. So I'm a little bit lower on him. I might even keep him off my draft board in certain leagues.
7th overall running back being selected right now, 12th overall pick. Guys, be careful, because I'm telling you right now, he overachieved last year. He did. I love him. He did a great job, but don't expect that kind of production this year. I don't see anything close to that, and hopefully he stays healthy. Your guy, Orlando's Mark Ingram.
Yeah, so Mark Ingram, 22nd running back, 53rd overall, and I'm staying away from this mess with the Saints. Going back to Mixon, I would take Mixon over Mark Ingram at this spot. And Mark Ingram's not a bad player. He's been pretty good. The injuries, obviously, has been concerns, but it's just a mess going on, and it's just going to be hard flip-flopping if this is going to be the week that the Saints are going to roll with him, or if it's going to be Adrian Peterson eating to his carries, not to mention Alvin Kamara. So that's another bit of a mess, similar to what the Patriots are going on. So I'm kind of staying away from Ingram in this situation.
Okay, great follow-up here, because my guy is AP, Adrian Peterson. I'll just say this. Simply, he's done. Stay away from Adrian Peterson. We saw even when he tried to attempt to come back last year. We saw before he got hurt last year. Then we saw after he got hurt last year. It ain't there anymore, okay? I'm sorry. I hate that. But 27th running back on average being drafted right now. 66th overall. Again, you see how those numbers work. Heavily weighted towards running backs this year. But Adrian Peterson's being drafted on average as the 27th running back selected. Honestly, I know this sounds crazy, but that may be just a little bit too high. Guys, Adrian Peterson is done. Don't touch him. Dan, Mike Gillislee.
Yeah, we kind of touched on the Patriots running backs earlier. He's the 23rd running back, 62nd overall. I'm not taking him that high. I'm not touching a Patriots running back within the first 10 rounds. He is supposed to be their goal line back, similar to supposedly LeGarrette Blount last year, but he's not LeGarrette Blount. He doesn't have that type of pounding mentality. I mean, he's a built back, but he's also pretty decently fast and agile, and he doesn't break a ton of tackles. So I'm not super high on Gillislee. I would wait. 6th round or even earlier than that. That's crazy for me for Mike Gillislee. So I would definitely not even have him on my board personally. But if I was going to go after, don't go in the first 10 rounds.
So let's move right on down that Patriots running back depth chart, Orlando, and you got James White, Super Bowl MVP.
Yeah, so Mr. Super Bowl MVP, 40th running back taken, 135th overall. And I think that's great value for James White at this spot, especially in a bigger league, because the depth for running backs is going to get drier than being out in the desert. So for James White at this spot, I would take it, especially in a PPR league. And not only this, you know what you're getting with James White. You know the situation you're going to put yourself in week in and week out. So that's expected. James White at this spot, I wouldn't mind taking a flyer on him.
And that's where I would stop. I'm not taking Dion Lewis. Dan, Rex Burkhead.
Burkhead's intriguing because he's getting a lot of reps in training camp recently, so he's climbing draft boards right now. I wouldn't touch him. I would want to see on the field. I think he's going to go undrafted in most leagues. 170.
Sorry to interrupt, though, Dan, but as far as ADP right now, he is leapfrog Dion Lewis, who is technically listed as 3rd string on the Patriots depth chart. Rex Burkhead is technically 4th on the Patriots depth chart, but not according to our average draft positions right now.
Yeah, I think you're going to see Burkhead used in kind of that fullback H-back role in addition to being a tailback. He's going to be kind of lethal in the receiving game. He was solid in Cincinnati in that role, so I think Bill Belichick is going to use him in a variety of different ways. But the problem is if Bill puts in a game plan one week, it could not include Burkhead at all. The next week he could be featured in it, so you just don't know. It would be a waiver wire pickup or a daily fantasy play.
In my opinion, I think Dion Lewis and Rex Burkhead both should be guys that go undrafted. I'm not touching either one of those guys. They provide some value, but I'm not drafting them. I'm not touching them. So, Orlando, Bilal Powell.
Yeah, it's a 32nd running back, 80th overall. I love Bilal Powell this season. Look, especially with Quincy Newman placed on IR with that neck injury. As far horrible as the Jets have been, I mean, look, they're still a professional football team. Someone has got to score for them.
And it ain't going to be Quincy Enunwa either.
It ain't going to be Quincy Enunwa either. So I'm pretty high on Bilal Powell. I think he's going to be one of their main go-to guys. And we already seen what he could do, running the ball and pass catching on the backfield. So I really do like Powell, and you're getting him at a decent price as well.
So my guy is Matt Forte. Me personally, I'm a little bit higher on Matt Forte. That's not what the numbers say. That's not what Dan in Orlando says. I like Matt Forte a little bit better. But right now, Palau is the 32nd drafted running back on average, whereas Matt Forte is the 40th running back drafted on average. And there's a good 25 overall spots between them. So Bilal Powell's the guy. That's what Dan's been preaching for weeks. I just like Matt Forte better. Maybe the age is going to catch up to him finally. So not real high on any Jet this year either. One of those running backs, though, like Orlando said, is going to have to score. They're going to have to get points every single week, maybe. So we'll see. But beware of the Jets. And finally, Dan says Todd Gurley is going to have a bounce-back year. We've been hearing that for weeks. So wrap up the running backs with Todd Gurley, Dan.
Yeah, Todd Gurley. I mean, I remember last year he was going 1st overall in some drafts, and now he's the 11th running back taken. That's quite a fall. 22nd overall. I'm high on Gurley this year. I don't think he's going to run like a girl like he did last year. You're going to see a bounce back. The Rams have an improving offensive line, and Jared Goff is their quarterback, so they better pass the ball no more than 5-6 times a game. That's how bad Jared Goff is. So I think Gurley is going to be in a similar situation like Fournette, getting the ball a ton, but I think he's going to be able to do more with it. So I like Gurley, and not only that with rushing, but there's talks and reports out there that their goal is to get him involved in the receiving game. So if he can start catching passes out of the backfield, he's going to be a top 5 running back this season in fantasy.
I'm glad someone still agrees with me about Jared Goff, though. I think it'll all work out. It'll all prove itself. Watch. So let's move on to wide receivers. And Orlando, your guy is who? It's easy, Orlando. This is a cupcake for you. Julio Jones.
Easy, but not as easy as for me as you would think. Look, I know he's listed as 2nd wide receiver, 5th overall. fifth overall. I would definitely have him as one of the top 5 wide receivers, but I am not taking Julio Jones second overall. I don't want to spoil the list too much. I'd probably take Odell or even Mike Evans at second. But you're still getting hell of value with Julio. I think if he just picks up his touchdowns a bit, he only has 6 last year. That was kind of a disappointment in a way if you think about it like that. The team does have a bit of a Super Bowl hangover. It's the Falcons also come up with a lot of questions. So you're definitely getting a stud wide receiver in Julio Jones, but personally, I'm not taking him as a second wide receiver off the board.
Ooh, that's surprising. So real quickly, Dan, I think Nick may be trying to pull one over on Judy here, because what I'm missing here, I'm missing a few little points here, but I'm missing the number out of and I think this list Nick came up with this list here. So. Yep. Or maybe they came up with them together. I don't know. But we're missing the number 1 drafted overall receiver, and we're missing the number 3 drafted overall receiver, which leads me to ask you, Odell or Mike Evans, which one is which?
So Antonio Brown is 1, and Odell is 3.
Wow. So Mike Evans is not in the top 4.
I believe he's 4th.
Either, guys. I'm just saying cautionary tale on Antonio Brown. Dan keeps preaching, and he's not on the list, but I'm giving you, some just bonus information here. Dan keeps preaching, watch out for Ben Roethlisberger's health. I'm saying this Antonio Brown ride's going to start coming to an end pretty soon. I'm not real high on him. Of course, I'll take him fairly high, but he's not number 1 anymore, guys. He's not number 1 anymore. I'd put Mike Evans in that slot before I put Antonio Brown. Just me. He's not going to be returning kicks anymore. But moving on, my guy is Dez Bryant. He's the 8th overall. What happened to Dez Bryant? Damn. 8th wide receiver being selected right now, 17th overall, which is still fairly high overall. That almost doesn't add up, 8th overall receiver, but 17th overall pick. Got no problem with Dez, but I'm telling you the production, and here's where I'll praise Tony Romo. Dez is not going to have the same production under Dak Prescott that he had under Tony Romo. So that's why Dez is slipping. Be careful. Still a top 10 receiver for sure, but be careful. Dak doesn't have that arm and doesn't have that pocket presence in game that Tony did. So the numbers are not going to be as high. Dan,
it's good to hear you say Tony Romo's a future Hall of Famer. All right, on to Julian Edelman. All right, so Julian Edelman, 25th wide receiver drafted, 55th overall. We're going to talk about Brandon Cooks, Orlando Will next. I like Edelman more than Cooks this year. Cooks is the flashy name, the guy who's getting all the attention. He's coming over. That was with Drew Brees, and I understand Tom Brady's better than Drew Brees, but it's just the system. It's a different passing system. He hasn't gone deep as much. I mean, he did to Chris Hogan a little bit last year, but in PPR leagues especially, it's going to be Edelman getting over 100 receptions again. He's the favorite target of Tom Brady, and I'm confident that he will not only have more receptions but more yards than Brandon Cooks. Touchdowns, Cooks might have him a little bit there, but I think the bulk is actually going to be rushing touchdowns and to Gronk and to some of the other taller wide receivers that they have, like a Malcolm Mitchell. So I like Edelman this year. 55th overall, that's a 5th-round pick, 6th-round pick, around there. I like it. I like it. I would take him before Cooks, who's going multiple rounds earlier.
So fantasy speaking wise, the receivers is a mess too, guys. That's a close battle to me. I think in my own head. I don't know what is actually going to be what, but Edelman and Cooks, Orlando, Brandon Cooks, new team.
Yeah, so 11th wide receiver taken 27th overall, and I'm sorry, Nick and Judy, for the confusion. To confuse even more, but I am taking Cooks way over Edelman. Hell, I've been taking Cooks over Dez Bryant in some leagues. I know last year he finished as the 8th receiver. And it's not like he's going to another slouch. I know Tom Brady's getting older, but look, they didn't get Brandon Cooks for nothing. I'm going to put Gronk 1, Cooks 2nd. I mean, Edelman 3rd. Edelman last year, even without Cooks there, he was on a bit of a drop-off. I know he was hurt, but Cooks just seemed to fall off, and for Edelman owners who took him last year, he was a bit of a disappointment. And with Cooks there, I see it still being that way. maybe not so much of a disappointment if you prepare yourself for it, but if you're preparing yourself for Edelman to be over Cooks, I wouldn't take Edelman that high. So I am really high on Cooks. And as the 11th wide receiver, I wouldn't be surprised if he finishes in the top 10 again.
Woo, and I started to send a highlight clip from training camp to Dan the other day, who I know is down on Brandon Cooks because Brandon Cooks is looking good. We'll see what happens in that Patriots wideout game. But my guy is Keenan Allen, a guy who kind of really hurt Orlando last year and a guy who kind of put Orlando out of the playoffs last year. It contributed to that anyway, but can't trust his health. God, I'm so sorry for this dude, but he's had like season-ending injuries in 3 of the past 4 years. I can't trust that. So here's what I'll say about Keenan Allen. I like Keenan Allen's skill set, particularly matched up with Phillip Rivers. If he's going to be on the field at least 13 to 14 games, no one can predict that. But overall, right now, 19th overall wide receiver being selected, to me, way too high. Way, way too high for Keenan Allen, despite his potential talent. 19th overall wide receiver, a lot of guys can fit ahead of that. The guy Dan's about to talk about next. But 41st overall. Here's what I'll say about Keenan Allen. Wouldn't touch him till at least the 6th round, and then I'd have to be absolutely desperate for a wide receiver, meaning I've taken like 3 stud running backs already, and I need that wide receiver. That's the only way I touch Keenan Allen. Otherwise, too much risk, man. Too much risk. Not going to touch him. Dan, you got Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, Tyreek Hill, the Chiefs' new number 1 wide receiver. I'm not buying it. I'm not a fan of Hill. He's off my draft board unless he's a flex play. He's not a wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 in my mind in fantasy. He had a great, breakout rookie campaign last year, mainly on special teams or jet sweeps. That's not going to be his role as much anymore. He's going to be tasked with that number 1 wide receiver role. Here's the thing. He's had his career high at any level that he's ever played football, 46 receptions. He's not going to be a 100 reception type of guy. He's still that gadget guy. Andy Reid can try and work him in, but if you're counting on him to be a wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2, he's not going to be. Draft him as a flex. So if he's being drafted right now, 47th overall, that's a 4th round pick. He's not going to be a flex play. He's going to be either a wide receiver 1 or 2 for you. Stay away.
Alex Smith is his quarterback. The only thing I would say may save Tyreek Hill is the return game. If you're playing in a return league, keep that in mind. But otherwise, I completely agree with Dan. So next for Orlando, Terrell Pryor looking good in training camp. Brand new team, looking good.
Yeah, 17th wide receiver, 37th overall. Look, I love Terrell Pryor. I know a lot of people were saying that, kind of beware with taking Terrell Pryor, that, last year he was pretty much all the Browns have. Look, I'm not buying that. I know Josh Doctson is down. Jameson Crowder, I'm very high on this season. And Jordan Reed there too, but when he's healthy, and he's lately he's been on the bad side of the injuries. So Terrell Pryor there, especially with the guy like Kirk Cousins, and their run game is a mess to begin with. They're going to be throwing the ball a lot down there in Washington. So, yes, I'm very high on Terrell Pryor.
Next one, my guy, Larry Fitz, who I'll be honest with you, I really hadn't studied the Cardinals' outlook this year. Of course, David Johnson's going to be pretty damn good. I can almost promise you that. But I'm of the opinion that Larry Fitz is going to be fading as well. 31st wide receiver taken, that's not actually bad. 67th overall. I just don't know. I would say, and we've talked about Carson Palmer's health as well, and can he stay healthy, and just putting it all together in Arizona. Probably passing over Larry Fitz for some other guys, maybe even some rookies. One that's coming up next, Dan will talk about. God, I missed it by 1. I want to talk about this goddamn, but Larry Fitz, I'm just saying, be careful. Look at some other guys. I'm just a little bit worried about overall health of Arizona and the amount of touches that David Johnson has to get and the fading production that Larry Fitzgerald is going to bring. But average draft position right now is he is the 31st wide receiver taken. I'd say that's probably about right. Dan.
Brandon's man, Corey Davis, rookie, Western Michigan. He's right now being drafted 41st wide receiver, 103rd overall. I don't mind that. I'm not, Brandon knows this, Orlando knows this, I'm not high on Corey Davis this year. I do not think he's going to be the Titans' number 1 receiver. I don't think he's going to be their number 2 receiver in terms of stats. You're going to see a better year out of Rashard Matthews, especially in a PPR league, and watch out for the name Taywan Taylor. That was the best draft pick the Titans made in this last draft. John Robinson was a genius for selecting this rookie out of Western Kentucky. He's lighting it up in Titans camp right now. And here's the biggest reason why I'm not a fan of Corey Davis this year. His hamstring. Brandon don't want to hear about no hamstring. He'd rather eat some ham. But hamstring's a serious deal, especially for a wide receiver. He's going to be cutting in and out, and he's not going to be cutting bacon. He's going to be cutting that hamstring up. So it worries me. He hasn't been able to participate in camp at all. You know, if this continues to linger where he doesn't practice playing preseason games, I'm dropping him way lower than 103rd overall. So be wary, but that spot right now, as long as he's going to be healthy, is decent value. I'm not going to kill you if you draft Corey Davis in the 10th round, because you probably have at least 2 or 3 other receivers, so you don't have to rely on him in fantasy. But do not draft him as a wide receiver 2 or even a flex play right off the bat. He might work his way into that, but not right away.
Judy, Corey Davis. You got to be a Titans fan, Judy. Corey Davis. Trust me on that. I've had some Titans fans argue that Eric Decker is going to be the number 1 wide receiver on the team, which is nutty nuts. So
they can go lay down. Eric Decker isn't going to do anything.
No. We talked about that before.
Taywan Taylor.
My contention is that Corey Davis will be the number 1 wide receiver very early in the season. So watch and see. But Nick, Judy particularly, because you make it still one here. Corey Davis, like him. Sammy Watkins, Orlando.
Yeah, so 15th wide receiver going, 34th overall. And look, I like Sammy Watkins this year. I know he's been just on the wrong side of injuries. I think the past 2 seasons he's missed 21 games. But, he comes with a massive upside. Those foot injuries, I'm glad, seeing in training camp, he's been planning, he's been running. And obviously that means nothing until week 1 and they're fourth. But for Sammy Watkins going late 3rd, early 4th, hey, I'm taking a flyer on Sammy Watkins. I do like Sammy Watkins this year, and again he comes with that massive upside. I mean, Sammy Watkins could easily be a number one wide receiver by the end of the season if he could stay healthy. And for where he's going again, I think he's a steal.
Well, we'll talk more about Sammy Watkins, so we'll cut you a little bit short there, Orlando. You'll have your chance to talk a little bit more about Sammy Watkins and that massive upside a little bit later. Me? Is this me? Okay. Golden Tate? I don't know. I mean, we talked about Matthew Stafford having a great year. Golden Tate is what he is. I'm shortchanging you folks on the podcast here with this one because I really haven't studied up Detroit or Golden Tate much, but he's a 26th receiver being taken overall. We're now 59th overall is what concerns me a little bit. I'm not sure I'm going to go that far, although he had a decent year last year. I'm just not enthusiastic about that team this year. I don't know. Again, I'm shortchanging you on Golden Tate. I mean, if you're a Golden Tate fan, if you need that wide receiver, you can study it yourself. I think that's probably falling in order. I would say he's probably around, to me, if I had to rank him, he's probably going to fall around 30, maybe slightly below what he's currently being ranked at 26th overall wide receiver being selected right now is Golden Tate. So sorry, I'm not helping you out there too much, guys. But the next one is puzzling as well. Dan, you got to Stephon Diggs to wrap up the wide receivers.
Stephon Diggs, I don't find it puzzling. 27th wide receiver, 68th overall. He's the number 1 guy in Minnesota. Sam Bradford is going to throw the ball quite a bit from what we've seen. I mean, he was the most accurate quarterback ever in the NFL. So that's something you don't think you'd say. Sam Bradford, accurate, ever, NFL. Just weird. But he throws to Stephon Diggs. I like Diggs. I actually like him more than Tate. And Tate's being drafted a little bit earlier than Diggs. He's just the number 1 guy. Laquan Treadwell couldn't even get on the field because he didn't know how to play last year. I'm not too concerned about him stealing any snaps. And then the other guy is Adam Thielen or Thielen, however you want to pronounce it. No offense to Thielen, but I mean, he plays like a Brian Finneran back in the day with the Atlanta Falcons. He's cool, but he doesn't light any feathers or wet my whistle, as I said previously on the podcast. So it's Stephon Diggs. He's their offense besides Dalvin Cook. I like him.
God, I wanted to use wet my whistle this week. Oh, you beat me to it. What happened to Teddy Bridgewater, guys? What the hell happened to Teddy Bridgewater? I'm seeing him currently ranked fourth on the depth chart for the Vikings.
He only has one knee. That has a lot to do with it.
Yeah. But Stephon Diggs. Sam Bradford throwing the ball here. And I'm one of those guys that drafted Laquan Treadwell last year, thinking that he's going to be one of those stud rookies. I've preached this before on the podcast. Rookie stud wide receivers. It's going to happen every year. It's going to be probably a couple of them. I thought it was going to be Laquan Treadwell last year. I was wrong. It didn't happen. Not even close. Didn't get on the field. I'm sure I ended up dropping him. But
I wonder if Brandon's going to have a similar with a rookie wide receiver this year, maybe a Corey Davis.
I'm rooting for him more of a Titans fan, not necessarily fantasy value. I'm just saying, watch out. I think he could be good, but I'll miss on 2 out of 3 for sure. But I'm going to hit on one. And one of them was like,
so that's why you listen to Dan. I hit on 2 out of 3.
Okay. Well, I hit on 1 out of 1 championships, Nick. Let's move on to tight ends. Here's his list. Whose turn is it anyway? It's Orlando's turn. Gronkowski. Gronk.
Yeah, so first tight end overall, 21st overall. I mean, come on. This is no-brainer. You're taking Gronk. I don't really recommend taking a tight end in the first round, or I guess really second round for Gronk. But with a guy like Gronk, you're clearly gaining an advantage at the tight end position over basically everybody else. So it's Gronk and then everybody else in the tight end tier. So, yeah, there's no-brainer there. Take Gronk and just be happy with the points he's going to give you.
Future debate topic. Nick, to confuse you, I'm not touching Gronk at any round
What?
this year. I'm done. No, I'm done with Gronkowski. No, dude can't stay on the field. I'm done with Gronkowski. Future debate topic. We'll talk about that next week. I got another guy, pretty much in the same situation, Jimmy Graham. I don't like the scheme they're in Seattle. I don't like, honestly, this is where a guy like Eddie Lacy may hurt Jimmy Graham. Jimmy Graham is going to catch the occasional touchdown every 3 or 4 weeks or so. That's about it. There's nothing near the production that he was in New Orleans under Drew Brees. I'm not high on Jimmy Graham. So what it is right now, he's the 5th ranked tight end, or drafted tight end. I promise you I can find a few more guys to draft in front of Jimmy Graham. Down on him this year. I'm not saying it's going to be horrible, but the 5th ranked tight end, no, I'm finding plenty of guys. I'm finding at least 8 more guys to draft ahead of Jimmy Graham this year in the draft. So I'm not high on him. Watch out is what I got to say. A guy I am pretty high on and had all year last year, Dan, Martellus Bennett. Again, another new team for him.
Yeah, Martellus Bennett, 7th tight end drafted, 84th overall. At that spot, 84th, that's okay. I don't think being in Green Bay this year, I don't think he's going to be used a whole lot. Aaron Rodgers doesn't always look to the tight ends. He's more of a receiver guy. I mean, they had guys like Jared Cook who had decent seasons, but nothing spectacular. Richard Rodgers is there, but I mean, he might look to him towards the end zone, similar to like a Jimmy Graham, like Brandon said. But I don't think he's going to have more than 50 receptions, 500 to 600 yards. Might get close to 8 touchdowns around there. So decent for where he's being drafted, 8th, 9th round pick. I think that might be a little high. I might wait a little bit, but it's decent value.
And that's what his draw was last year with the Patriots, end zone targets. That's what he does. I mean, that's what he's great at, end zone targets. Next up, Orlando, show my dude some love. You got to remember, Nick and Judy are from West Memphis, which means they're close to Tennessee. Got to be Titans fans, I would think. We need to clarify that, but show my boy some love.
Yeah, well, Delanie Walker, I think you're getting him at the right spot. I mean, 8th tight end, 75th overall. You pretty much know what you're getting with Delanie Walker, but I'm sorry, Brandon, but I'm taking a guy like Jimmy Graham over Delanie Walker. I apologize. Jimmy Graham's just a big red zone target. And look, I like Delanie Walker, but it's not just Delanie Walker. The tight ends have added a lot of pass catchers in that offense. So you might see Delanie Walker get a few more targets in his offense. So, as the 8th tight end, I mean, I could take that, but I'm not taking him over a guy like Jimmy Graham.
Dan, settle this for me. Delanie Walker or Jimmy Graham? What do you say?
This season, Jimmy Graham. I think there's too many weapons in Tennessee right now. They're not going to be able to spread the ball around as much. So I don't think Walker's going to get as many targets. And besides Doug Baldwin, the Seahawks don't have a whole lot of receiving options. And if we're going by your approach with your Eddie Lacy love, he's working out in the offseason, losing weight. Jimmy Graham worked out with Eddie Lacy, lost 20 pounds. So he's down, slimmer, better than ever, supposedly. So if that's your logic for Eddie Lacy, then you should also like Jimmy Graham. But I will say this. Let me just say this. Jimmy Graham at 57th overall compared to Walker at 75th overall. I do like Walker's value at that spot.
Watch. This ain't gonna be
everybody in the Titans is going to score a billion touchdowns. Your Corey Davis, Delaney Walker, Mariota's going to run and pass one in at the same time.
It's not going to be that kind of turnaround, guys. You think Tennessee has more offensive talent than Seattle?
Yes, without a doubt.
Okay. All right. I'd like to believe you. I'm just not buying that this year quite yet. I've got to turn around. Mariota's health is another issue we didn't even talk about. My guy, next, second to last guy. We're going to talk about Hunter Henry, huge on this guy. Saw him in Arkansas. Also, another one for you guys. I know he's currently ranked probably third on the depth chart in Washington, but Jeremy Sprinkle, another Arkansas Razorback tight end, huge dude, along with Hunter Henry. At San Diego, 11th tight end being drafted right now, 101st overall. Hey, he made his splash as a rookie. I saw this coming. Hunter Henry is going to be a stud tight end. Keep an eye on him. Probably about properly placed. I think he's creeping into the top 10 in tight ends. It's going to take another year, though, for people to see that, for him to prove that. But I think that's about appropriate. And what else is appropriate is Dan finishing this whole conversation, this rapid fire unit, with his guy, Jay Witt.
Jay Witt. I love this value. 15th tight end selected, 156th overall. Are you kidding me? That's a 15th round draft pick. Jay Witt is definitely not the player he once was, but in a PPR league, he's still going to get you 60 to 70 receptions. He's going to be that check down target for Dak. And I would not be surprised if he eclipses 80 receptions. He's not going to be looked at in the end zone a whole lot. He'll probably get 3 to 5 touchdowns, so he's not going to blow the world on fire. But in a PPR league, this is insane value for Jason Witten, who would be a starting tight end. If you draft Jason Witten, I would start him because, any given day he's going to get 7 to 10 receptions. He might only have 60 yards with those receptions. He's not going to be breaking any more tackles with his helmet off like he used to. But for this value, PPR league, definitely take it.
And Dak did seem to favor him a little bit last year. As far as, if you're in a PPR league, his production really didn't dip too much because Dak was quarterback. Dak seemed to favor him. I think that's going to work out. Thank you, Nick. That was a great piece, because we just went rapid fire for about 30, 35 minutes on you guys, going through all the top studs in the NFL when it comes to fantasy value this year. So great topic, Nick. Love it. And only a guy so close to Memphis, Tennessee could come up with such a brilliant thing. That's what we do in the South around Memphis. Just come up with brilliant topics and just do brilliant things. So thanks, Nick and Judy. And I hope Judy does well. And if this is her first year playing fantasy football, and I hope we helped. So we do have mailbag questions to get to, though. We'll do that next and get into that, because the show's not over. So thanks for sticking around. You're listening to and watching My Fantasy Podcast from myfantasysportstalk.com. Now we got to do rapid fire on these questions, because this is going to be a long podcast. So the first one comes from David Riley. Wait a second, fellas. Orlando's not a Lizzie? I thought the same thing a few months ago. Great show last week. Had me giggling like a little schoolgirl. What are your thoughts on Ty Montgomery? Is he a legit running back 2 in fantasy? David Riley. So real quick, my answer, David, is no doubt. I think he's possibly a legit running back 1. The only competition he has, hear me out, Dan. Let me snickering like a little schoolgirl. The only competition he has is... The only competition he has at running back is a rookie, Jamal Williams. And the thing about him, Ty Montgomery, is he's really utilized more and better as spread out and used as a wide receiver. So dual threat guy, definitely right there. So I think when you're talking about overall fantasy production, Ty Montgomery's going to be right up there, because what's the chances that Jordy Nelson and Randall Cobb both stay healthy the whole year? When's the last time that happened? It's been a while. So it ain't going to happen. As long as Ty Montgomery does and you draft him as a running back, overall production, he's probably going to end up with RB1 value. That's my opinion. So, Dan, since you're snickering,
well,
what up?
Hold on, man. I'm just still I'm dealing with the you calling Ty Montgomery an RB1.
No, I said potential RB1, definitely RB2.
RB1 and Ty Montgomery should not go in the same sentence, the same paragraph, the same story, the same novel, the book. It shouldn't happen.
Are you a Packers hater? Is that what's going on here? You hate Eddie Lacy. You hate Ty Montgomery. What is going on here?
Yeah, I'm a hater, but I'm a lover of Jamal Williams. That's the reason why Ty Montgomery is not going to be an RB1. That's why he's not going to be an RB2. Maybe in a PPR league he'll have RB2 value. In standard leagues, heck no. Not even a chance. He's not going to get the goal line work. He's going to be utilized in the passing game. I don't expect him to have more than 300 to 400 yards rushing all season. Jamal Williams will be their main guy. It might take the first 4 weeks for him to get accustomed, get some touch. Use him early, because towards the end of the year he's not going to have as much value. Jamal Williams is a beast, and he's already working with the first team. He's strictly working also as the goal line back, so he's going to get all the rushing touchdowns when they're close. You may look at Aaron Rodgers and say they might not run the ball, but he's going to be down there in the goal line. So I like Jamal Williams a lot, and I would draft him before I draft Ty Montgomery, but you don't have to, because Jamal Williams you can get at the very end of your draft, and you can just reap the benefits.
So what's Jamal Williams' ADP? Because I personally think he's going to go undrafted in our draft unless you draft him.
No, he will not go undrafted in our draft.
No, he won't, because I've been drafting Jamal Williams as well, just like I listed in the article. So from that perspective, I wouldn't count on Ty Montgomery as a legit RB2. And you just mentioned it yourself, Brandon. You said of Jordy Nelson or Randall Cobb being healthy. So with that being said, I see Ty Montgomery possibly moving back to wide receiver, because I honestly think Jamal Williams is going to take that starting role. Just like Dan said, it may not be right in the beginning of the season, just like a Joe Mixon situation. But, plus you got Aaron Jones in that mix of two. Aaron Jones has been making a name for himself, too, in training camps. So I'm not going to give this job fully to Ty Montgomery. And just from what I've been seeing from Jamal Williams, I think he's been blocking better, too, compared to what Ty Montgomery has been doing for Aaron Rodgers.
But you guys are thinking about it as a traditional running back position. I'm talking about being on the field and providing value and versatility and adding up fantasy points. That's exactly what I'm saying. We talk
PPR league, yeah, but a standard league where you're getting points mainly based on touchdowns and 100+ yards, he's not going to have that.
But you're never going to be able to succeed with that traditional type running back under Aaron Rodgers, is what I keep preaching, because Aaron Rodgers is going to have to throw the ball 35 times a game. It's not going to happen like that. You'll never have a Zeke Elliott type situation in Green Bay as long as Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback, or New England as long as Tom Brady is the quarterback. But I'm saying it, as far as accumulating, it only takes 3 or 4 catches from the backfield from Ty Montgomery to eclipse any kind of ground production you can get from any other running back on the Green Bay Packers. It's a tough call. But I'm saying, yes, Ty Montgomery is definitely an RB2 for sure. You guys disagree with that? You're not touching him. Not even RB2, not even close. When you're talking about, I don't care what position he's drafted at, I'm talking about fantasy production, total number of points put up every single week.
I think Jamal Williams will end with more fantasy points than Ty Montgomery does.
Okay, and Orlando's agreeing, I assume.
Yeah, no, same. I've been taking Jamal Williams too late. You're basically getting free right now. So, yeah, I can guarantee he's not going undrafted. Dan already mentioned that he's aiming for Jamal Williams. I've been taking Jamal Williams too in a lot of mock drafts.
Okay. And I'm saying I'm not touching a guy that's ranked second on the depth chart at running back for the Green Bay Packers behind Aaron Rodgers. Never. But, hey, David Riley, you done riled us up. That was a great question. Appreciate it. Now, we're going to watch that unfold as the season goes on. We'll talk about that and keep you giggling like a little schoolgirl.
There's your highlight clip.
There you go. So next one comes from my man, my homeboy, fam, Christopher Allen Reed. Same spelling.
Is that the guy? Christopher Allen, is that the guy from Winnie the Pooh? Wasn't that the kid's name?
What's it?
Christopher Robin.
Yeah,
Oh,
that was Hey, shut up talking about my fam. Christopher Allen Reed says, I'm in a 14-man league. Is Paxton Lynch draftable late? As a Tigers fan, he is my man. I feel you there. I just want him on my team. Should I hope he falls to the waiver wire? Most mocks I have done have him going undrafted. Side note question, if I may, Brandon, how do you like Memphis's chances this season? Funny story, I met Larry Porter at a charity event and told him he was the worst coach I've ever had the great pleasure of meeting. Christopher Allen Reed, I feel you, dog. I feel you. So here's the thing. I don't think you're going to have to worry about drafting Paxton Lynch at this point. Word is it's not coming together like John Elway had hoped unless something happens and he is named the starter in the next couple of weeks. And I don't think you're going to have to worry about drafting him. Nobody's going to touch him. I think the Broncos offense is not looked at very highly right now. For good reason, and I don't think anybody's going to be high to draft him. So I think you're okay there. If you draft him in the last round if you really just absolutely want him on your team to be safe. But I think you're going to find that he goes undrafted, particularly if they play the safe route and Trevor Siemian ends up being the starter week 1. This is going to play out in the next couple of weeks. I don't know if you're at the point where I just don't understand. If you're John Elway and you know that Trevor Siemian is not the long-term guy, then let Paxton Lynch have the job. Just let him play, work it all out on the field. I think he has the skill set and capabilities to do that, so just let it happen. So I don't know. Have you been keeping up with this, Dan? I mean, I'm assuming Trevor Siemian's going to take the job. Same deal as last year.
Yeah, I mean, out of training camp, I've heard Simeon's the guy, but when we were talking mini camp and OTAs, Lynch was supposedly lighting it up and impressing coaches. And from a guy that I quoted, I think his name was Mike Gillis, somebody who writes a beat reporter for the Broncos, said that Lynch was the guy it was his job to lose basically in training camp. And I guess the first week he lost it, and Simeon's going to be the guy. In terms of the question, if you really want him on your team and they haven't named a starter yet, yeah, go ahead, draft him with your last-round pick. Worst comes to worst, you can always drop him and pick up somebody else if he's not the starter. But if he is the starter, I mean, that's decent value, last-round pick for a guy who has some potential. We don't really know what Lynch is going to do in the NFL, but if he can put up minuscule numbers, the type of numbers to maybe a lesser degree that he did in college, heck, that's going to be great value, and you probably end up playing him more. But I would probably wait, depending on when your draft is, to see if they name a starter, and wait until the very end.
You have to. Otherwise, Christopher, I don't think he's going to be drafted. I don't think there's anybody that's going to touch Paxton Lynch at this point when he's supposedly the number 2 guy on the draft chart. Orlando, real quickly, let me get your take on the Broncos offense, period, because I noticed that C.J. Anderson was one of your guys on your risk versus reward piece. So, overall Broncos offense.
Yeah, not too high on the Broncos offense either, even though I do think Emmanuel Sanders for where he's being taken is a pretty good sneaky value. But yeah, not so much that I'm so high on C.J. Anderson, but just like I said, you're not getting him at a high price. You're getting him in the mid rounds. Devontae Brooker proved that he couldn't get the job done when C.J. Anderson went down. And come on, you really think Jamal Charles is going to push C.J. Anderson for a starting role, or even Devontae Booker? There's rumors that he might not even make the team. He might get cut in the next couple of weeks. So yes.
So how do you think the quarterback situation is going to affect those guys too? Because that counts. If you got a guy that you're not afraid of at the quarterback position, you need to start with quarterback before those running backs can even get the job done. So, who are you leaning towards? You have a favorite or anything you've heard? What do you think? It's obviously 1-2.
I'm going to lead with Siemian at the moment. It's been kind of a mess. I know he's been there a little bit longer, but I've heard too that Paxton Lynch is also going to get reps in preseason 1. But that's typical. But it's a mess. I'm going to lean towards more with Siemian, and I guess for Christopher who sent the question, and if you're viewing Paxton Lynch as just wanting him as being a fan of him, I wouldn't do that, especially in a 14-team league, because every pick in a league that size, you got to make every pick count. And just taking a guy like Lynch because you want him could cost you.
And I can promise you Paxton Lynch will go undrafted in our league. No one is even studying this dude at all. So, and until he's named the starter, I think he has no value. No one. The Broncos, that's what I'm saying. The Broncos offense is predicted to be so bad and it dropped off so much that I don't think a backup or second string quarterback from the Broncos is even going to be anywhere near anyone's draft boards. So I say just let it play out. Unless, like I said, he's named the starter in the next 2 weeks or so. But as far as their Memphis Tigers go, watch out, baby. I don't know if you're from Memphis or just have ties to Memphis. Dan mentioned to me that you may be from up north, Canada. So I'd like to know what your ties are to Memphis. But I appreciate the question, and appreciate the love, and appreciate you watching the podcast. Appreciate all the Memphis folks. We're going to be good this year, man. We are going to be good. I mean, I really see a 10-2 season unfolding here. So here's the thing. We're preseason ranked on CBS 49, and I see we have 2 back-to-back stretches this year. At UCF, which could be a tricky game, and then hosting UCLA, which is the biggest game the Liberty Bowl has hosted for the Memphis Tigers in a long, long time. Big game there. If we can get through the first 3 weeks undefeated, if we can go 3-0 through Louisiana Monroe, no big deal at home, UCF at UCF, and then UCLA at home, then we're looking great. The next big stretch comes October 14th and October 19th when we host Navy, which is great, and then at Houston. I don't know how Houston is going to be there. Houston, Navy, and Memphis is all ranked about the mid-40s or so, so that's going to be a close stretch. But how is Houston going to be without Tom Herman, who has moved on to Texas? I don't know. Not real high on them, but I think it's going to be a great year, man. I think it's going to be a great year, and I think we finish if we can go 3-0, we finish no worse than 10-2 for sure. And then we'll see. I'm talking about 40-plus points per game. Don't play South Florida, which is great in the regular season because they're preseason ranked 19th with new head coach Charlie Strong. So we don't play them, so we got a break from the gods, the football gods there. And then you mentioned Larry Porter. That dude was 3-21 as head coach of the Memphis Tigers. I don't know that I would have had the balls to say it to him if you said that to him, but you were absolutely right about Larry Porter. So glad those guys are gone, or those days are gone. And by the way, Larry Porter's now tight end coach at Auburn, so he's moved in and got a pretty good gig, but not a head coach. Agree with you there. Man, thanks for the love. Thanks for the question. Christopher Allen Reed, fam, you got it. Let's move on to end this show. The last one comes from Ray Kirkpatrick, and this is easy for me. He wants to know, do any of you trust Sammy Watkins this year? My simple answer is no. Never been a huge fan. And as long as Tyrod Taylor is their quarterback, I'm not trusting any wide receiver for the Buffalo Bills. Dan, you're close to the situation. How do you feel about Sammy Watkins?
Listen, guys, I have one golden rule in fantasy football I followed ever since I've played when I first started at 8 years old.
Never take a bill.
Do not draft a Buffalo Bill. Just don't do it. Don't put yourself through it. It's not going to turn out well. I understand, LaShawn McCoy. I'm not even high on him this year. I think he's going to be not as good. Sammy Watkins, stay the heck away. It's nothing against Sammy. Well, besides he can't stay on the field. But it's more against Tyrod Taylor. The dude is not a quarterback, a starting quarterback, at least in the NFL. I mean, there's some Bills fans who are diehard Tyrod Taylor fans, think he's the franchise quarterback. He just needs more weapons around him. Put some weapons around him, man, and let him sling it. Well, he can only sling it to under 200 yards passing a game. So he finally got his first career 300-yard game, Week 15 last season. I don't expect him to do anything close to that. He's going to average, 215 yards passing a game. If half of that goes to Sammy, that would be amazing. But I don't think it's going to, especially with the signing of Anquan Boldin. I think he's going to take into some targets, not only from Sammy Watkins, but Zay Jones, who was a sleeper fantasy pick. I don't think so as much anymore. But it's just a limitation against Tyrod, nothing against Sammy besides his injuries. If Sammy was on a different team, I would expect a lot better numbers, but it's just he's a Buffalo Bill.
If he could stay on the field. We've seen kind of a steady decline from Sammy Watkins. But, yeah, I agree. Orlando, where would you take Sammy? Are you high on him, mediocre on him, or not going to touch him at all?
No, I'll definitely take Sammy. I've been taking him in the late third, early fourth. And that's typically where he's going. I understand the whole Bill situation and how horrible Tyrod Taylor could be, but look, he still has a big enough arm to get Sammy the ball. I know he's not, that great of a quarterback, but I think with the signing of Anquan Bolden, I think it affects Zay Jones more rather than Sammy Watkins. I think for a lot of the people we're hoping for a big Zay Jones year. I think they're going to have to wait to possibly next year to see a bigger workload from the rookie. So I think it affects the rookie more than it would Sammy Watkins. And Rex Ryan's not there, so I understand McCoy, but they're not going to run the ball as much as they were last year. So I would trust Watkins. I understand injury history, but he's also in a contract year. I would bank on that. I know, it's unfortunate that 15 and 16 that he missed 21 games. He was an absolute stud in 2014. But I'm counting on Sammy Watkins in the contract year to bounce back. So he's a guy, too, that I've been taking in drafts.
All right, there you go. That's as much fantasy knowledge and information as we can pack into one show. I'm spent. So I can't take it anymore. But I appreciate you guys for all the questions that you submitted, and appreciate the guys who submitted questions that we didn't get to. We're going to get to as many as we can, but our draft show is 2 weeks from tonight, so we're doing as much prep as we can, and we'll get to as many questions as we can, but that was a lot of information in one show, so I appreciate you for joining us, whether you did it live on YouTube, the replay on YouTube, wherever you joined us. But other than all the fantasy football prep and all that other stuff going on under the fantasy tab of myfantasysportstalk.com, Dan, what else is going on the site? Food Network star must be winding down and getting close to the crowning moment of this show.
Yeah, finale next week, Sunday. We get to find out if our friend at the site and show, Jason Smith, wins the title of Food Network Star. I think he personally will. He's been the best all season. So Food Network Star articles are up. I think we got some late movie reviews that came out. Game of Thrones, we're starting to recap now that the new season has hit. So entertainment section is blowing up. I mean, we've been dialed into fantasy football, NFL news. We're busting out some baseball news occasionally, like I brought out the postseason schedule. And before you know it, it's obviously going to be football season, but training camps for basketball are going to be coming up. So just stay tuned to the site daily. We're putting out articles basically every single day. And make sure you just follow us on social media, Twitter, Facebook, like the Facebook page. Send your questions to Facebook. We receive most of our questions via the Facebook Messenger. So just send it right to us. Shout us out on Twitter. Get your questions to us to help you with your draft. Next week will probably be all fantasy again. One more week of draft prep before we have our own draft right live on the show.
And big shout out to Dan, who fields all those questions. He's in so many different Facebook groups and takes so much heat and has to filter those questions from the insane to the absurd to the legitimate to the clean to the dirty. He has to filter them all every single week. So he does a great job in that. And we'll try to answer as many as we can on a limited time schedule. But that was so much fantasy football today. We're going to do the same damn thing next week. It's going to be all fantasy football next week. So Jackson Borland, sorry guy, there's going to be no fantasy baseball, no NBA, no nothing next week except fantasy football talk. We're going to basically do the same thing we did this week next week to get you ready for our live MFST fantasy football draft on the 23rd at 7:30 Eastern time. So keep the questions coming. Big week next week on the podcast for fantasy football. We'll try to get more writers on the show too, maybe next week, Dan, and maybe divulge some of their strategies and secrets so we can get a little bit of an edge going into it. Whereas Dan's staying away from Eddie Lacy, I'm taking him 4th round, baby. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But big draft show on the 23rd. Keep up with the site, myfantasysportstalk.com. Thanks for keeping up with the podcast, however you keep up with the podcast, whether you watch us live on YouTube or the replays on YouTube, and you check us out on iTunes, SoundCloud, WBLZ Sports, WBLZsports.com, and of course, check out the website daily. So much going on. Game of Thrones, Food Network star, everything like that. More than sports, it's entertainment, period. myfantasysportstalk.com. Why go anywhere else for sports and entertainment. Thanks to our favorite lesbian there in our San Antonio, Orlando Torres, for joining the show today and dropping his knowledge on us in fantasy football. And of course, thanks to my co-host, Dan Schalk. I am Brandon Reed. See you next week for a big fantasy football episode on My Fantasy Podcast. Later, podcast peeps. Peace.